Hello, and welcome to the 3 at 3 Writing and Publishing Questions with Angela James. I am, as expected, Angela James, and welcome. I don't know how many of you saw the intro countdown, but I really have to work on that music because it sounds a little bit like adult film music counting down. So, yeah, we'll change that. Welcome. We're going to go through 3 questions today on writing and publishing. And as always, if you have questions, don't forget you can submit them via the form. There's a link in all of the video descriptions. So please feel free to submit your questions for the next 3 at 3. And just a reminder, I don't know if you can see, but I'm representing today in the US. It is time to vote. So definitely go vote if you haven't done that already. And if you have, good for you. Thank you. All right, jumping right in. First question is, can you explain the value of reading your manuscript aloud? And at what point in the editing process would you recommend doing that? What if you have speech disabilities? So for those of you who have taken Before You Hit Send is my editing and writing course that you can look up on my website if you'd like. And Before You Hit Send, I have an entire lesson about this because I am a firm believer. But let me release you from a little bit of worry. It's not about reading your manuscript aloud. It's having the manuscript read aloud to you. So I know that the advice used to be to read your manuscript aloud, but what I found is when authors read their manuscript aloud, they are still inserting or hearing what they thought they wrote. But when you allow a computer program to read to you, it takes you outside of what you wrote. It takes you outside of looking at the manuscript and looking at the paper, forces you to listen. It's essentially a different medium. And in that way, you can almost remove yourself from the situation, from the equation, give yourself a distance, a barrier, and then you are listening to your manuscript. Now, listening to your manuscript is of tremendous value. And it is one of the top pieces of editing advice that I give to everybody. When they are stuck, I almost always ask, have you listened to it yet? And the answer is often no. Listening to it allows you, again, to gain this distance, hear what's actually on the paper rather than what you thought you wrote. It allows you to hear where things are missing. It allows you to hear where there's slow pacing, where your narrative is underwritten, where things are overwritten. In sense, it gives you a clearer view of what you have written. It also does things like show you just like where you've got wrong words and misused the wrong word, or have a misspelling, or forgotten words, or inserted extra words, or overused words. But I think that the greatest ability that listening to it gives to you is just that distance. And because the computer voice is robotic and doesn't have the inflection that you might give it when you're reading, it doesn't imbue emotion into it. The computer just reads what's there. It really allows you to just be distant from it and to say, this is how the reader is going to engage with it, not how I engage with it. So I do think it's a very valuable tool in your editing arsenal. Absolutely recommend it for anywhere that you're stuck. Try it at the beginning, try it during a conflict, try it during the sex scene, try it during the end. Like, listen to different pieces. And one thing that I always recommend is to listen to something that you love, like a scene that you really love. So you get a sense of the flow of your writing, of what's really working, so that when you're listening to the trouble spots, you have almost a compare and contrast. So that was a great question. Thanks for submitting it. And hopefully that helps a little bit. All right, next question. How do I find the best comp titles for my book when I'm getting ready to query? Are comp titles important to include? So this is specifically a question from somebody who is querying an agent or a publisher and writing a query letter, and they're asking about comp titles, basically comparison titles. So comp titles are something that have been used in the industry for a long time. They are particularly used in 2 ways. One, agents querying publishers on your behalf, and publishers selling into the retail market, selling into the brick and mortar stores. So comp titles can be important. The first thing that I want to say, though, is if you don't know comp titles, if you just like absolutely cannot think of any comp titles to include in your query, Don't let that be the thing that holds you back from querying. Not having comp titles is not going to make or break your chance with an agent or a publisher at the beginning of your query stage. So don't let not having comp titles be that thing where you're like, well, I guess I can't query because I don't have comp titles. Don't do that. On the other hand, comp titles can give the agent or the person reading the query a quick idea of how you're comparing, how your book will land in the market. So for instance, it might be soul food meets practical magic. And in that way, you get a sense of what you might be able to expect. A couple of things about comp titles is, one, you do want to try and stay relatively current. So current is usually within the last 5 years, maybe 3 to 5 years. If it's not a current comp, then it needs to be something that's a really big bestseller. So if it's 10, 20 years old, then you're going to use like Harry Potter, Jane Austen, things that are really, really well known and something that people immediately know what you're talking about when you say it. Don't use some obscure book from 10 years ago, because then the comp isn't going to do its job. It needs to do the heavy lifting of it being immediately identifiable, allowing the person who's reading to know, oh, okay, like it has these qualities or these characteristics, or this is something that interests me. So if you're going to use comps, make sure that they're current. You can use movies as comps too, but movies tend to be a little bit more difficult, and they are great for a query or a pitch or a hook. But if you're saying this is in the vein of 50 Shades of Grey, people know immediately because it's a book. We can compare it to a book. If you're saying this is just like John Wick, well, John Wick is a movie. How does that compare in a book? So you do want to try and keep the movie comps to the hook line. If you're looking for specific comp titles, then just use comp titles that are like within the last 5 years. And then the other thing about comp titles is also making sure that they're relevant to your book, not like this one obscure fact about this comp title compares to my book. Make sure it's thematically or tone or something else that makes it big comparison. All right, that's a good question. Thanks for that question. And question number 3. Oh, this is a good question too. How do you suggest handling negative reviews or low ratings? How do you deal with negative feedback? Well, in everything that we do, we are all going to get negative feedback. I get negative feedback. As an author, you're going to get negative feedback. Amazon gets negative feedback. It's all about figuring out why you're looking at the feedback first. So you may be somebody who may not want to take a look at your reviews, or if you want to see the positive reviews, maybe you have a friend or a family member who goes and gathers the positive reviews for you, but just doesn't mention any negative reviews. So if negative reviews are really difficult for you, then you may want to find out a way not to see them. The other thing is the negative feedback a review, or is it negative feedback from an editor or a beta reader or a critique partner? Because that's also different, in which case you may need to look at your book differently. You may need to decide whether or not the person who's the source of the feedback is somebody that you trust or whose input you value. So negative feedback and negative reviews are both going to happen. If you're getting negative feedback from beta readers, alpha readers, critique partners, you may want to sit with it for a while and figure out, are they right? Try and distance yourself from the feedback a bit. And by which I mean, don't take it personally, but think of it as feedback on a product. It's a feedback on the book, not a feedback about you. So you may want to think about it for a while. You do not have to action on all negative feedback or criticism that comes from an editor or a beta reader or critique partner. It's up to you to decide what you're going to action on. And then as far as negative reviews, you don't have to do anything about negative reviews. Definitely don't need to respond. You definitely don't need to screenshot them and share them around the internet and make fun of the reviewer or talk about what a terrible person the reviewer is. If you get a negative review, again, remember, tell yourself it's about the product. It's not about you. I know easier said than done, but trust me, I've gotten negative feedback. So I'm in a position to be able to say this. I've gotten negative feedback both about myself and about the product. So I've definitely dealt with this on both sides of it. So just remind yourself that it's about the product. Remind yourself that your product is not for everybody. So you are not writing a book for everybody. So you are going to get negative feedback and low ratings. And then you can say, is there something valid in there? Like if you're going to read your negative reviews, is there something you're going to take away? Are there quality issues? Are there a lot of typos? Did it need to be edited? Those might be valid negative review information. On the other hand, saying like too many uses of the word fuck, you know what? Then they're probably not your reader. Too much sex, again, probably not your reader. So it's a matter of balancing what the feedback is and whether or not it's something that you want to carry forward and action on in future books, or even in this book. Maybe if it's quality issues, do you need to have it edited and then re-release it? Something to think about. But again, there isn't a lot you need to do as far as handling negative reviews. Nothing is required of you. Just move on, like ignore them. Don't look at them. Yes, low ratings are going to happen. Yes, it affects your star rating. This is one of those things where you are going to be railing against the universe if you try and figure out a way to get people to change their ratings or not to get low ratings. Somebody mentioned this past week that somebody left a negative review on the children's book, The Hungry Caterpillar. Every book gets negative reviews. Every book has people that don't like it. Every author has people that don't like them. So you're not going to create a perfect scenario in which there are no negative reviews. There's no low ratings. That just doesn't happen. So that is the end of our 3 questions. I appreciate everybody who submitted questions. Don't forget, you can get your questions submitted, and we will be back again on November 17th. So don't forget to submit your questions for November 17th. I am willing to answer any questions about writing and publishing. And if I don't know the answer, I'll either find it for you or I will say, I don't know. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. Have a great day. And hey, don't forget, go vote.